Today is Saturday, May the 9th, and I'm here with Richard Merrill Bowser, who was in the band Violent Apathy, one of the early hardcore punk bands to emerge in the Michigan scene. How are you, Richard?
Hey, I'm doing great, Creighton. How are you?
Doing great. It's a pleasure to have you here and to be able to sit and talk to you about your time in the scene and about Violent Apathy and about punk rock.
Excellent, man. Thanks.
So let's just start from the beginning. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your music kind of taste before you got into punk rock.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in Jackson, and I mean, really, for three of us who started Violent Apathy, we were from Jackson. We went to school together and stuff. My mom had a lot of good records. My dad had like just shitty country music, so it got stale fast. But my mom had some cool stuff, and the radio was really good then. You know, you had Motown, you had rock and roll, you had. I was a kid in the '60s, and then I met other influences. As a kid, I went to school with. He turned me on, Phil Richards. He turned me on to like Jethro Tull, Black Sabbath, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, stuff like that. And then we had a Recordland store at our mall that was brand new, when I was probably like 13. And they had all kinds of stuff. I mean, they had a really good punk section. I think they must have been a decent chain, So records would start to come in, and there's still, a lot of progressive rock and stuff like that. And as I got more in classical music, avant-garde stuff, all kinds of things like that. But just always, any extra money I had, I was going to the record store, to buy something, And then I started working in the mall, at the cinema in the mall. And there was this guy, and you may know who he is, Jerry Yonkins.
Let me get my pen and pencil out here.
Okay. And he was from Detroit. He's older, than me.
Jerry, forgive me for a second.
No, that's all right, man.
You know what?
No, you need to look this one up.
Yeah.
That's fine. No, that's all right.
I'm always getting people like, oh, right, do you remember this get this
he
name
was
down?
In a band, at the time, he was in a band called Flirt.
Okay, how do you spell Jerry? Okay, how does
Jery?
Okay, how do you spell?
I think it's Younkins. Yep. And he was from Detroit.
Okay, and he was in what was the name of his band?
His band was called Flirt.
Okay.
And anyway, I think he's still alive. But he had made this movie that they made around Jackson called The Demon Lover. And this would have been just 50 years ago. This was the summer of 1976. So I am working at the theater, and even though I was a kid, I was 17 or whatever, I had to run the projectors. I did all kinds of stuff there. And he hands me this cassette to play between so I put it in, it's like, hey ho, let's go. What is this stuff? And he goes, oh, that's the Ramones. They're all brothers. That's punk rock. It's going to be bigger than the Beatles. So I got to hear the Ramones almost when it was new. They're just starting out. And without that little chance encounter, I probably never would have got exposed, with that, right? And into, finishing up high school, into going to WMU, I was still working during the summers at the theater in Jackson, and the people at Recordland, the guys were giving me all these promos, like the Saints, Radio Birdman, Talking Heads, all this kind of stuff. Hey, you like this kind of, So I got exposed through them too, being home, and we didn't, and at that point, starting to meet people at Western. We were going to Western Michigan University. Kenny was, and I was. We met another friend, Elliot, and then there was Jim, who was the bass player. He went to MSU. He was a couple years younger than us. So we had Lansing connections kind of through him. But then we met the guy that ended up being our drummer, Elliot. I met him in the dorm at Western. He had worked on the 1980 census with Tesco V and Steve Miller.
Oh.
Okay, so have you heard about the 1980 census?
Yeah, you just refreshed that for me because I remember reading it in the book.
Well, those guys had worked together, and I'm pretty sure it was Steve, Tesco, Elliot.
Is it possible Corey Russ was involved in that too?
No, he was still in Toledo. He was he knew those guys. I mean, they all knew each other at that time. But those guys were still. I mean, the Necros guys were loaded high school kids. They were all rich. They could just travel. They could just do whatever they wanted. We were poor. We could travel so much. We could do some. But those guys, yeah, they were everywhere. Yeah. And so anyway, Elliot had worked on the census. He had a tape of the Necros. And then we went to go see the Fix play in Kalamazoo. And we were like, well, this is wild ass shit here, And so we had them play at the dorm one time, then it went pretty well. There was another band, the T-Snakes from Kalamazoo. They were like new wave, but they were playing together with the Fix. So we were like, okay, And we were starting to meet people at WMU who were beginning to form a group of people that had interest in some kind of, punk music or alternative stuff or, post-punk or whatever. Probably the first one who really was a Detroit connection was Brent Mullen, BRENDT MULLAN.
Spell it for me again one more time.
BRENDT.
Okay.
MULLAN.
Brent
and he
Mullen.
has a twin brother, Brian.
Brian Mullen.
Yep. And Brian was like a promoter and stuff and a scenester in Detroit. Brent was his twin brother who went to Western. So those guys who got us. That's who got us to be able to play in Detroit.
Okay, so Brian and Brent. Okay.
Yeah, but Brent I met at WMU. There's a whole bunch of Michael Love. There was he ended up being in Spastic Rhythm Tarts and Strange Fruit, which was another Kalamazoo band with some interesting connections because later on Steve Shelley played with them for a while.
Oh wow!
And he has some interesting Kalamazoo connections. So going back to what was going on at Western at that time, there was a whole bunch of people. They did kind of this collective group, and it was called QRA, and that would have been late 1980, early 81, and kind of that split off of that was Violent Apathy, and we were called Gradient first, GRAD, like a hill,
Yeah.
And then Jim, our bass player, coined the name Violent Apathy from the attitude of prisoners on death row. And I think it applies more to Jackson, having been living there the last few years. It really is the attitude of Jackson, but that's a different story. But anyway, so we began to get together in the spring of 1981. We played up at Bookies. We did play Bookies later. We played at the Club Doobie in Lansing.
Club Doobie?
Yep. And we had gone to that show that where Black Flag played.
At Bookies?
No. Well, we saw them at Bookies later, but
okay. But you saw, but they played at Club Doobie.
We saw Club Doobie. Yep. And that was the first time I saw the Necros. We had tried to go see them up in Flint and got there too late. So we saw, and yeah, that was a real powerful thing, the Black Flag with Des singing and stuff like that. And at that point in time, a real kind of explosion of stuff around, the hardcore scene of coming out and connections. Kenny, who you will really need to talk to, Ken Knott, is he was writing to all these people, and that's how that scene developed at that time.
Because there was no internet and social media, so the only way you could do it was writing. And if I remember right, Tesco was also somebody that did a lot of writing to people.
He sure did.
And like the DC crowd, and then like
he had Touch and Go magazine too. So,
yeah,
that was a huge influence at that time. Yep. And Kenny did a magazine for a while called Etch, and so he sent that around to all kinds of people. I remember he would get like 7 inches from G.G. Allen and just weird ass shit, right? So he was writing. This was 81, 82 time period,
So like 80, so you'd say like 80, 81, 82 was like really, it was like in its like incubation period, hardcore.
Yeah, and in 1981, and this is where it kind of comes back to Brent, and I think another person who was a huge advocate for us in that time period was John Brandon.
John Brandon, of course.
Okay, so
I know John is.
Yeah, I know. And so we ended up playing this thing in Detroit in the fall, like September or something. I mean, you can find the date because it's the skate park.
And what year was that?
1981. And it was the fall. We played at the skate park. And
so it wasn't like because you mentioned the skate park, wasn't like the whole skater kind of culture kind of like hand in hand with like?
Oh yeah, totally, man. Yeah, so I don't skateboard, but yeah, a lot of kids did and stuff. Yeah, there were people at Kalamazoo. People had half parks. Actually, if you wanted the skateboarding connection, I was thinking about this on the way over here. Bill Ferguson. And that's like Ferguson, but with 2 S's. He was in a band called Fate Unknown.
Yep.
And he has run a skateboard, indoor skateboard park and shop for like 30-some years in Kalamazoo. You should try to find him. He's on Facebook, I think.
Okay.
So that's just thinking.
Yeah, that's
definitely there, and Detroit too. I mean, people, Jackson, Michigan has these signs. Skateboarding is forbidden in the central business district of Jackson. We call that violent apathy. That's you can't skateboard here. And I've talked to people who, like my ex-brother-in-law, Sean Varney from Kalamazoo. He was a big skateboard guy over there, and a lot of his people were, and they said Jackson was super rough for skateboarding. And I don't know more about that stories and details. I've heard that from 3 or 4 people. I put something up on Facebook about that sign. We had more trouble there than anywhere and stuff like that. And this would have been early 90s probably, for that.
Can I ask you, about what drew you to punk rock music?
It seemed like it was like the future. It's weird. Like when I first heard the Ramones, I'm like, wow, this sounds like a jet taking off or something, And people are like, well, this is like, and I read really, well, they're like the 50s. I'm like, no, they're not. This is, and with it was just. And with hardcore specifically, the speed and the fact that there was almost always with the music of that time some kind of underlying melody to it.
Yeah.
You think of like Negative Approach would take that. They combine some musical aspects from British music, like Oi and stuff like that.
Yeah, like Sham 69.
Exactly. Oh, that too. And put that into it along with pieces with just incredible speed and just a lot of focus and stuff. And that's what I always liked. That combination of the speed, melody, anger,
which is funny that you say that because like I get like mixed. I've gotten like mixed viewpoints about like hardcore from some of the older Detroit punks from like that were like in the first wave. And
it was friction. I don't know those people, and I'm not from Detroit, so but Oh, certainly I'm aware of that scene and the
Yeah.
idea that there was different of opinions there about from both
Oh,
sides.
yeah.
Yep.
Another question: were you into the Stooges at all before you got into punk?
It's interesting. My history with Iggy Pop is really weird. Like, we had Metallic KO, so that was interesting with all the swearing and all the stuff on it. New Values, and then started getting the Stooges records after that.
And you also,
So-
we've talked about
So they sort
Bowie.
of influenced. Yeah. Oh, Bowie. Okay. So I heard lots of this stuff on the radio. It was not Ziggy Stardust stuff. It was Young Americans that won it, like he broke over, right?
Yeah.
And so I was in Chicago for a couple weeks and staying with my uncle, and he was like, "You should check this out." I'm like, "Okay," so I did, and then just having that record alone, it just led to all the rest of his stuff, and Aladdin Sane I like a lot. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
The Diamond Dogs,
Of course.
I had the Changes One. I had all the other, I had Ziggy Stardust. I didn't have like the real deep old stuff so much, but yeah, and then like Low came out and Hero. I was a senior in high school when Low came out. So yeah, all that stuff. Deeply influential.
Which I think is something I do want to highlight because it seems like it crosses over from each like little scene that like I'm writing about. Is like everybody talks about glam rock being like this influence.
Oh yeah, it was just
Bowie,
there, yeah.
Or the Dolls, or
Yeah,
Sweet,
sure,
or
yeah.
T-Rex.
I listen to Sweet a lot, yeah.
Oh, I love 'em.
Because, Desolation Boulevard is just there, right? I mean,
I mean, even as like bad of a person as he was, like Gary Glitter, like his music, I mean, it had some. I don't know.
It's a hard one. I know exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, like that.
Yep.
That. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly
Yeah.
what you're saying.
I
love that rock
yeah.
and roll part too, man.
Yeah.
But Bowie, we really enjoyed his stuff a lot in college. I'll tell you the record that meant the most to me, in the sort of similar vein, Another Green World.
Pardon?
Another Green World.
Another Green World?
Yeah, that album alone, like I had read a review of it, I don't know, Rolling Stone, I think, and it's talking about how he was laying in bed and had a radio he could barely hear, and that became this new thing, and his record's got sort of like that, but not really. So it's got rock and stuff too. And so Recordland, of course, had it right there. Didn't have the special order in it. Oh yeah, and ended up getting the discreet music, and ended up Evening Star or something, and then later on the first records. But Another Green World, that just really blew my mind at the time, because it really had just the musicians he brought together, and to be able to do something very different than what they normally did, like Robert Fripp and Phil Collins.
Oh yeah.
On that. And it's just really, that record really changed my whole attitude about music almost, and the Ramones did too. So there's a couple right there that did, and so. So back then we had all that, and then what really affected us was hearing the music from California first, like LA stuff.
Yeah.
And it was so hard to hear stuff. We got stuff from tapes a lot, and like who made some tapes for us was Dave Stimson, the other guy.
Dave Stimson, yeah, I've heard his name, but
the other guy from Touch and Go. He made these tapes that had like Middle Class and stuff like that on it, and that's how we got to hear some pretty deep stuff, from that. And that helped too. That was an influence toward VA. I think we were going to be like kind of like the Cramps kind of a way, like Primitive and stuff.
Yeah.
And then when we started hearing this stuff from DC, it kind of got more like Militant or something like that, I think, So
now,
does that make sense?
Yeah. Now let me ask you this question. And you hear a lot of people say they try to talk about punk, and they're my age, and they say, well, punk was never political, or there's and it's like, I'm sure you'd probably agree that, like, at that time, like, there was a political aspect to punk,
Well,
hardcore.
okay, so yeah, I thought about yes.
Reagan, the Cold War, all that.
So Violent Apathy started as VA April of 1981. We did our last show in September of 1984. It's almost totally contiguous with the first term of Ronald Reagan. With a couple of exceptions of people I knew, most of us couldn't stand him. Yeah, it's like kind of like today, just more low key, but there was a lot of economic desolation in that time period, especially Jackson. Emptied of a lot of population during that time period, moved down south to different places because of no jobs. Detroit area, that's some of that.
Yes.
Too, but it was just a real bleak. We were all going to college. I was going to Western. Kenny was going to Western. Elliot, when we after like the original VA, we played a bunch of shows. We come back to the skate park here. We played a bunch of times in Detroit right after that, in the whole fall of 1981, up through the first thing at the freezer. We played at the first thing that was at the freezer. So Nunzio's, I don't know, there's like maybe 4 times in a row or something, We also, during that time period, we did play at Bookies. We actually headlined at Bookies. There's like 20 people there. It wasn't like a big, but we actually played there. It was on a Friday night, I believe. And it was interesting, and we did the Process of Elimination record with those guys. That was recorded up in Lansing, in East Lansing. And all this stuff happening. And then, at the end of 1981, beginning of 82, Jim, our bass player, who was also our friend from Jackson, he left the band. He's like, he had to focus on academics and stuff. So we finally found a new bass player. But then after that, Elliot, our drummer, he was going to go play with somebody else. So we started over basically as a 5-piece band at that point. And that would have been at around the end of 1982. And what happened then was really cool is we got like different kind of regional recognition, more toward the Midwest, like Indiana specifically. We recorded twice in Indiana with Paul Mahern, who's like the best.
Yeah.
So the stuff that we did, with him was really exceptional. And we got to play down there and stuff. We did play in Chicago one time. Apparently, Dave Grohl was there. And it's in the Nirvana book, Azrael book.
Oh, wow.
And we're mentioned in there. Yep.
Oh, really?
So, yeah, we influenced Nirvana. Yeah, there you go. Yep.
Well, there you go. You got something.
Yep. So, and we, during the last year we were together, we did our 7-inch. And we came back to Detroit a couple times. During that time period, we opened for GBH with Negative Approach. You just saw that flyer for it not very long ago.
Yeah.
And Marginal Man, and maybe 1 or 2 other. Well, we played in Ann Arbor a couple times here. We played at the Star Bar. We played, we played at the Halfway. That was a big deal, playing it. We played at the Halfway House or whatever it is. With Negative Approach, I believe, I think it was. Yeah.
So it seems like you worked a lot with the Negative Approach, or like the Necros, right? Did you ever work with the Necros?
Well, we would do shows together, yeah. There was a big one of the.
Was it like a camaraderie between you guys, or was there like?
Kind of. Here's what I think about it now. Whatever the age I am, 67 or what. I can't believe I got let in. Why are we, and again, it's like, back then I was kind of like, well, these, I don't know, but now I'm like, I can't believe it, because those guys were real history, camaraderie, more like competition-y camaraderie, but there was the first big show in Kalamazoo was the Misfits. So there was the Misfits, Necros, us, and the Crucifix.
Yeah.
So, and it was at this Eagles place. There's all kinds of video of it on YouTube, so that you can find that. And
what year was that? What date?
that would have been September of 1982. I don't know the exact date, but that's when it was. And if you look up Misfits, Eagles Lodge, Kalamazoo.
What was that like opening for the Misfits?
Well, I'd already seen them at least once, and the thing with the Misfits, like, okay, Glenn Danzig has a great voice. There's no doubt about that.
Of course, yes.
Beautiful voice. He's had. That's how he's been like. And the music, I mean, it's kind of old school, but when they tried to be hardcore and more fast, it didn't really work. They always had to be. They were like a slower, sing song kind of thing, or that. But so there was like this girl who went out. There wasn't like a lot of people. It wasn't like a whole dance floor full of people. Some girl went out and tried to like skank around a little bit to the Crucifix, and Doc Dart pushed her down. Okay, that's how. I mean, he's kind of, who I'm, Doc and stuff.
Yeah.
And so Glenn Danzig was like, I want to kick his ass, man. Nothing. I don't know what ever happened, but that's just like. But yeah, we saw them in Detroit in '81. I want to say like around September. We went to see Black Flag there when they played in Detroit, and then the Misfits, and they were both at Bookie's. Those two shows were. I always like Black Flag better. The Misfits are fun. They're kind of comic booky, or kind of, they're kind of,
I would say I was like raised on the Misfits.
Sure.
Walk Among Us, and their whole first album, fantastic.
I sold 2 other records recently for a lot of money. So.
The Misfits and the Dead Kennedys.
Well, so Elliot, again, he was the one that turned me on to them. Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best records ever made. Really.
Oh, for sure. I would agree with you.
Absolutely. It never gets old.
Yep.
It's, and Biafra, as much as they tried, there's good stuff and all later on, but there's nothing that's coherent all the way through that like that. Yeah.
It's the magnum opus for them,
It is. Have you ever seen the Incredibly Strange Music book? Because that's another thing I really got into, is like Martin Denny and, Exotica, easy lounge music kind of, or stuff. And Biafra's way into that, and always has been.
Oh, yeah.
And there's in the second, this was from like 1995 or something, these books are research books. With their, there were 2 called Incredibly Strange Music, and it's like 75 pages of him blathering or something. Of course, he talks for 6 hours.
It's funny. I'll show you the video, but there's video of me when I was like 9 years old. My mom took me to see him play, and they put me on stage, and you can see me. I have my bald head. I'm like 9 years old, and he's like, when you get to be our adult age, he's like, you're gonna have to hold the Bush people accountable, and I'm like, he's right, and I had a great conversation with him too, and he was like, oh, this kid's impressive, I had people telling me, they're like, he couldn't stop talking about you after that show. I love Jello.
We saw him 1982 at the Upstairs place, like a City Club or something like that.
Clutch Cargos?
Yeah, and they played, and it sucked because we were having phone problems, and they were trying to get a hold of us to open, and we couldn't do it.
Did you ever go to or play at Clutch Cargos?
Yes, in terms of. But it seems like, was it called the City Club?
They called it the City Club, and I have.
It was called both, but it was at a big upstairs space, kind of.
I think it was It was
in a
like
blown out part of the city. That's what I
think so.
remember.
I think so. Like
There's abandonment everywhere around it.
Yeah, because there's two. I always say there's the two city clubs. There's the Leland City Club, which didn't come out until 84, 85.
That's not the one.
Yeah, it'd be Clutch Cargoes.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I saw one of the best things I ever was on my birthday. It was 24, 1983. Went to stroll over with Kenny and his girlfriend and me. The three of us, I think, came over to see the Minutemen and Black Flag. And I ended up meeting those guys, Boone and Mike Rod, George somewhat too, but B. Boone is kind of one of my idols, so it's nice to talk to him. Those guys played in Kalamazoo later, and we'll get to that part with the shows in Kalamazoo and SPA. But that was there, and remember and Dead Kennedys was there too when I saw it. That same place. Yeah, it was right a year later. Yep, I met Jello there. Yeah, good stuff. Yeah.
Did you guys ever play in Canada?
We did not, and mostly, for me, it was just not being able to afford to do very much at all. We had college students, we had, part-time job maybe, to be able to it was a big deal to be able to come over here to play in Detroit. I heard about that stuff, like Coronation Tavern, and this stuff in Windsor, and that looked like it was really fun. But no, I wasn't part of it, no. Didn't get to go. And then, I didn't, for us, all of us people that were in that, especially I think in that wave of hardcore, that it was like the whole state, and it related back to Detroit for sure. But Lansing, the Fix, those guys, Tesco, all that fueled. You had Toledo and Maumee.
Yeah.
And those guys were outcasts there. I mean, there was no scene there.
Which I think is interesting because I don't know if you know who Lacey is. He had a band, Son of Sam. They came out. They must have came out like 82 or 81, 82.
I'm aware of a band called Son of Sam.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Yep.
And he was telling me about how there was a really big connection with Kalamazoo, Lansing, Toledo, all the different cities in Michigan with Detroit. It was there was that exchange, that back and forth.
And I was part of that. Yes, that is exactly great. That is exactly the point. Of what we did.
Yeah, and this is why I'm sitting down talking to you because.
and that gets into a thing called SPA, Students for Progressive Action. And if you the Tony Rutman book, right? Why Be Something That You're Not?
Yep.
Okay. He has all those in the back of the book, all the shows that SPA did.
Yeah.
It started right after that Misfit show, right? So it was active from 1983 to 1986. It was an official organization of Western Michigan University. How? I don't know, because Kenny was not going there. He just had somebody to go file these papers, and you're a student. And he had friends, and we were able to get the campus facilities to do shows.
Wow.
And he was really strict, about stuff. And we had good security. We had people always trying to mess with it. They wanted to bring, no, you can't drink. You go drink over there. You can't drink here. Stuff like that.
That's a funny parallel to, in England, a lot of the bands would, they would come out of art schools, and they would get grants from the art schools, and the art schools would let them play. Because the colleges would give them grants and stuff, and that's a kind of an interesting parallel.
It was sort of the university at that point in time. There was a place called East Hall Gym where we did some shows. They had Circle Jerks played there, Black Flag played there, Slip It In time at Black Flag and Saccharin Trust. Butthole Surfers and Naked Ray Gun, and I think Sam Hain too. Yeah, when they first Stowing was first started. And I think those were the big four right there. But yeah, they, and then at basically the student center, like it's called the Bernhard Center, Black Flag, and also the Minutemen headlining. I think those were the two big. Well, there were more there later after SPA, but those were the two that we did. We did Minor Threat at Kalamazoo College, and that was really small, but it was it was real. And let's see, more other shows with Negative Approach, other shows at different places around Western and stuff like that too. And it's interesting because with Western too, that I was a disc jockey. I have 2 degrees, actually got my master's degree later on too, where I was a DJ at the Western has 2 stations. They have the big NPR station, and then they have the student-run station. And I was volunteered there for about 25 years, probably, or something like that. And they did a lot of concerts and stuff too. And they hosted Husker Du. Remember that at the State Theater?
Wow.
The Pixies played in Kalamazoo I think 4 times. Okay. Nirvana played in Kalamazoo 3 times, I think, including the show on a Monday night. There was this place called Club Soda, and that was during that what you would call indie rock of early times or whatever. Dinosaur Jr. played there. It was all on Monday nights, and it was run through the radio station. That series lasted 10 years.
So you've mentioned some like venues where you guys played at, like in Lansing, Kalamazoo, and Jackson.
We never played in Jackson.
Oh, you never played in Jackson? There was no punk, like no little punk place where you guys could play at.
When none of us were living in Jackson.
No. So in Kalamazoo and in Lansing, like what were some of the places that like punk bands would play at besides, like you mentioned, the college? Yep. Was there a place like the Freezer? Because sometimes people say things and it goes.
There was later on. There was this guy Joel Wick, and he was kind of the second wave of hardcore stuff in Kalamazoo. And they did what you want to call it, and then Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo ended up having a very thriving, and this is more in the last 10 to 15 years, house venue scene. Kalamazoo, my friend was talking, everybody's an edgelord DJ and a noise band against Kalamazoo. It's got a small, there's all kinds of things, representative of music. And that's always been cool too. And my radio station always kind of promoted that too. But there have been house venues. There's been some clubs. There was a place called The Strut around 2010 to 2015. It was just phenomenal. They had a lot of other stuff. And this guy, Matt Dorban, and some others, a lot of garage punk stuff in Kalamazoo, and worth trying to explore that too. Because, they would have like your Demolition Dollars or Detroit Cobras or groups like that playing in Kalamazoo.
Oh, yeah.
So that was more late 90s, the White Stripes playing in Kalamazoo a few times, So it's not just, there's like techno guys from Kalamazoo with that, like Jake Benham, so, it really, there's like all these things where it connects.
Yeah. Now, the Freezer, you guys opened for the first night, right, for the Freezer?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, it was cold. There was no heat in there. it was a bleak environment. I mean, for what we were thinking, it was a big open space with like a rickety stage. I think we played at some point during the night, but other than that, we were there. However many people were there, when you think about how many bands played that night, most of the people there were in one of the bands, probably, right? So it was that big, but I mean, it wasn't, it was the things that I remember about a lot of that stuff at that time period was how challenging it was for us to get there. It was like a 3-hour drive, and then we'd figure out where we're going to go. Sometimes we could spend the night with somebody there, or whatever. A lot of times we had to go back home at 5 in the morning or whatever.
Oh boy!
So you're factoring that in too. So I remember it just really being kind of rushed and and it happening so and I know that with all the stuff that came right after that we weren't part of because of Jim. We just didn't have a band at that point in time to do.
So you didn't go to the clubhouse or any of the other?
I've been to the clubhouse, but we didn't play there. Now we did. Now in 1983, April, we played at Cobb's Corner. That was one of the best shows ever, man. With Negative Approach and. Mostly, I'm trying to remember who. I got Crush Collins. I don't know who was the third band. It's actually 2 more, I think. But that was a great show.
So when you guys as the years kind of progressed, the years went by, did like a scene kind of start to come about in your eyes? Like, did you start seeing people like showing up and like more people attending, and not just people that were in bands, but like people that were into the music and
Yes, and where we saw that the most was those shows, big shows at Western, like the ones in the gym. Yeah, where 300 people would show up and stuff. Yeah, I mean there was. And you're right that it is mostly like the first part, but yeah, it did. Kalamazoo, the biggest thing with Kalamazoo is it's not big enough to have consistent things all the time, and there's fickle. So somebody will do something, they'll have 3 or 4 shows, oh my God, they'll show up and then they have one and nobody shows up. There's a venue right now in Kalamazoo, the Runoff, and it's a house basically, it's somebody's garage. It's a big, old, it's this big workshop or whatever. And they've had shows where nobody has showed up. They've had shows where 200 people have showed up. Next weekend at Kalamazoo, the Crosses with Dan Kubinski, De Kreutzen, they're going to play. And they played in Kalamazoo. They played at that Runoff place about a year and a half ago. And that's been where a lot of shows are right now in Kalamazoo. Some at Papa Pete's. There's another place that's downtown. It's more like an all-ages place. We're just having stuff. So they do lots of stuff there.
So did you see bands like starting to come about as you guys were coming along and doing shows? I mean, did you see people starting to come up, create bands and kind of take part in this whole thing that you guys were doing?
I think so, yeah. I mean, that would be for us, that would be the people in West Michigan that we knew the most. The kids from Holland, the Grand Rapids somewhat, and those guys started a whole bunch of bands, Holy Terror, House of Sorrow, Man Alive, and that was, a lot of that kind of came after Violent Apathy, but there were all these people from, like Tommy Fuller, our guitar player, he was from a town called Hastings, and he had ended up in Kalamazoo. There were other people, some that were from almost rural areas, they just end up there, but a couple kids from Hastings. One guy just died. He did all kinds of stuff in the scene there. So, yeah, you did get more people, drawn in, and more people from different, areas and different sectors. Their high school kids listen to the college radio station in those days. It was real for them. Now the college radio is just kind of a vanity for the students or something. They're running.
Yeah.
I mean, they don't even hardly listen to it anymore. But back then, that was the real culture, so they would tie stuff together, through that to do things back in those days and get a lot more high school participation. Kalamazoo, diverse, there's students, there's people that are from Kalamazoo who are very intellectual or whatever too. There's students that are real dumbasses. I shouldn't say that, but
No, it's okay. It's okay.
It's not like here, but it's all right. But yeah, one incident I was thinking about in Kalamazoo was this would have been probably around the beginning of 1982. L7 played in a living room in a house. And so all the guys were there, we all started doing this.
Yeah.
And the cops show up and they think it's like some kind of fight or riot or something. And they shut the whole thing down and let everybody leave and stuff. Like they got to play like 2 songs. But there was another example of, them, of the Detroit, crossover of different people,
Oh, and L7, I mean, they were a unique band from what a lot of people have told me.
They were, I'll tell you what, we talked already about, Brandon being encouraging, right?
Yes.
And Larissa, to me personally, Larissa was always super encouraging. It was sad to see her, going, especially the way she did. I will say this about Larissa, kind of a guitar innovator in a way. Her style of playing, I mean, being the front person of a band is one thing, but, she worked the instrument to create a sound. That was different.
And I heard that people have told me that, and I've still got to listen to L7 more, is that L7 kind of was in that post-punk vein. They were kind of, somebody told me they were like Joy Division in a lot of ways.
Well, or I mean, kind of. I mean, maybe they would say, maybe if you listen to it more now today, you'd think it's probably harder than they thought it was back then. It was actually. But yeah, I mean, that was the idea. Is Dave Rice, was he part of that?
I think so.
Yep. I vaguely know him,
I'm trying to get him to do an interview, but he won't write me back or anything about it, so.
Probably doesn't want to talk. He's probably got traumatic memories.
Yeah.
The people that lived in the city, we never lived in Detroit, and it's wild, Creighton. Like, okay, I've been to the Dally in the Alley in the last 10 years. Right?
Yeah.
That's right. It's like Cedar Point down here, man. This is great. One time I saw Brandon walking down the street and talking to him, but that's, I'm like, wow, but how bleak it was back then in that neighborhood, in that area. It just felt really dangerous, especially for us being from Jackson or Kalamazoo or whatever. I'm like, why are we here, So that part is really changed. Detroit's come back a lot in that,
of course,
that area around Wayne State and that whole part of town. There's a lot better than it used to be. But that's where most of the stuff happened. They'd always have a place, like a clubhouse or something like that. Or the Cobb's Corner, that was right there, that bar was, and stuff like that. But I heard just horrible stories about, just a tear from prostitutes to heroin and
oh yeah.
And we didn't really have any of that in Jackson per se, or Kalamazoo. So that's the thing about the people who lived in that environment every day. That must have been a much different kind of thing.
Well,
us,
I mean, a lot of people tell me it's like you had to really be brave to partake in the scene, because of that, and because of what was going on, and a lot of the abandoned buildings. I mean, it made it where it was easy to do a lot of these things, which I think is interesting. I think it ties into that DIY ethos,
Well, that was one of the with Kenny in particular, that was always his thing. We're going to do this ourselves. we're going to make something happen.
Yeah.
As opposed to nothing happening. And, something, and, he did that in Kalamazoo. He did that in Lansing. He lived in Lansing for a long time. And I think, if you get, I had some like, you know who John Howard is?
I don't think I do know who John Howard is.
Jon Howard. And he is the owner of Flat Black and Circular. I think one of the owners or whatever. I think he might be the owner now.
Okay. Tell me about John Howard.
He was around in the early scene. He would know a lot about different ties of how people came together, especially in Lansing. And he's been involved with the FBC record store. He's had his own, like, different bands and stuff. Plus, he took a lot of photographs. He took a lot of photographs at Cobb's Corner at that show. Some ones that of us in particular, and Brandon and stuff like that. He was on. They did this thing up in Lansing where it was a panel presentation. I don't know who hosted it. Probably Access TV. I don't know, who did it. But he was part of that. Steve Miller was part of that. Have you talked to Steve at all?
Yes, I did.
The funny, Steve. Now this is really off the record, but I love Steve. He's helped me in a lot of ways. This is too hard to take. He's very conservative politically.
Oh boy.
Yep, and it doesn't come out much, but yeah, it's something. He has helped. He has helped me significantly.
Well, Steve Miller, his book was kind of like, I don't know if the word is right, the impetus, the inspiration for me to want to do this, because
he's a great writer.
Yeah, he's a great writer.
He's a really good writer. He wrote a really good piece about me in
really,
one of the local magazines. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I'll find it for you.
Well, he when he did that book, Detroit Rock City, and he went and he talked about like bookies and the first wave, and then when he talked about like hardcore punk, I felt like I was like there's so much missing, and on top of that you have the nightclub scene that came out, like Todd's and all these like other clubs where they were playing new wave and punk, and you were getting all these people from different scenes to come together. I think that's like something that should have been talked about, but I get it that he had a time frame and he couldn't get everybody, but it inspired me to be like, you know what, I'm going to write something that's a little more deeper and a little more focused on like punk, hardcore, goth, and new wave.
Well, there's this book. Have you seen this book called Acid Detroit?
No, I have not.
You got to check that out. And the acid is some kind of weird communist philosophy. It doesn't mean LSD, okay? And this guy ties together Motown, techno, and John Brown. So it's
wow.
It's a really good book. I got it from our library in Jackson. Yeah, it's worth reading. It's a very different take than Steve, but that he maybe we're talking to. Have you talked to Tesco at all?
Tesco and I are going to do an interview, but he just had thyroid surgery a few months ago, and his voice is not up to par yet. And I told him, yeah. He's like I could do it, but I want to make sure my voice is up to par. And I said, that's fine. I said, I know. I said, my mom had the same kind of surgery about 10 years ago, and it took her months for her voice to recover. And I said, just take all the time you need, And I want to talk to him. And I've met Tesco before. Yeah. I could tell you a really funny story about seeing the Meatmen and what Tesco did. And I had to be about 11 or 12 years old.
He's a very normal man, which he has to be
But he has such a dirty sense of humor.
Yes, he does.
It was at St. Andrews. He was there and John Brandon was there. But Tesco, because Tesco knows who my mom is, so he came up to me and he's like, I'm gonna do something, and it's my wife's birthday. He's like, I'm gonna have this big giant blow up penis. and I'm going to throw it out into the stage. And he's like, and I want you to take it, and I want you to bop my daughter, and just wave it around everywhere. And I was like, okay. I'm like, yeah, sure. And he asked my mom, he's like, is that okay? And she's like, yeah, sure, And I'm sitting out there, and I'm like 11, 12 years old, and I got this thing, and this guy's trying to grab it from me, and I'm like, don't you grab my penis. And then I bopped his daughter, and then I hit John Brandon, and his beer fell out, and it fell out of his hand. I think it was him, or it was Opie, or one of those guys. And they're like, Michelle, your son bopped us. We need a new beer. We need beers. And Sherry, the bartender, is like, don't worry, I got you covered, And that was a funny story. I told Tesco that, and he was laughing because Tesco has that sense of humor. I love that.
The Meat Men, there's a demo that they did, and both Jim and Elliot from VA are the rhythm section. And Rich Ramsey on guitar.
Didn't they mention you guys lyrically in a song?
They might have. I don't know.
Because somebody was like saying like, oh yeah, was it that song? Was it Tooling for Anus that they name dropped you and Negative Approach or somebody? I'd have to look at the lyrics.
I know there's something. Yeah.
But somebody was like, they wanted me to ask you that, and then I was like, I forgot what they wanted me to ask you.
Supposedly he thanked VA except Dick. That's the one you better
check
that out. Yeah, I know that.
Yeah.
And you and I are fine, but I could be kind of prickly back in those days, so it's like I think about that, but yeah. But I didn't understand Tesco. So now he's not a perverted man. He just is a performer.
Yeah.
And so it took a little time to maybe understand that too. Which leads us to you had asked about later stuff in Kalamazoo. Have you heard of the Godbuilders at all?
Oh yes. Okay. I know Mike.
That would be they started. Mike Hard came to Kalamazoo in 1982. Well, he grew up in Kalamazoo. He had been in the military. And he had a couple of bands and then got the Godbuilders going. And he's kind of, the other guys in the band are kind of like, he's like Greg Ginn, he's like put a band together, then we name none of the guys, that kind of stuff. Having said that, I want to go to Cadillac and see this new Black Flag, so we'll see.
Yeah, it's all young kids, except for the drummer.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, except for Greg Ginn on guitar, yeah. Those guys did a lot of stuff. And in the 90s in Kalamazoo, there was also it was going to be like the next Seattle and shit like that. There was these bands like Twitch, Thought Industry was there, metal band, Mom Handy. There were some other bands like that going on then. So it's always had stuff going on. But yeah, I'd come back to this. Talk to Tesco if you had. Talk to Steve Miller. I recognize talk to John Howard. Craig Calvert was the guitarist for the Picks. There were not a lot of black people in this scene.
Oh yeah.
He was one of them.
Be him, and then there's Lacey, who I mentioned about in Son of Sam, and then there was Hiawatha, who he goes way back to like the Stooges era.
Yep. Significant. Yep. And there were these the Midland and Mount Pleasant area. That's where Steve Shelley is from, Midland. And then there were these, at Western, there were these other people that did stuff too. Like Tim Folion, he did stuff. $2 guitar, he's like avant-garde stuff. So, Kalamazoo had all these different things, coming out. And, let's see.
Now, besides, I know you guys were listening to hardcore a lot, but did you guys listen to any of the new wave or the post-punk or gothic stuff that's coming out?
So there was this guy, and he was the he was kind of the main musical player for like Strange Fruit and Spastic Rhythm Tarts, Michael Love, who is, I've talked to him. I see him on Facebook. I've seen him a couple years ago. He had both Joy Division records. He had Psychedelic Furs. He had a record, Wanna Buy a Bridge. You know that record?
I've heard of it.
So yeah, and about the same time we're hearing. Well, he actually had Metal Box. I never had an actual Metal Box, but he had Metal Box.
Wow.
You know, and he was my roommate. You know, and he had all this stuff. We did, you know, I heard about Joy Division right after Ian Curtis's death. I did not hear of them while he was alive. So there was that element all the time of them, right? But it wasn't very long. I heard about them in 1980 or whatever, and later that year, and heard their records and stuff. I personally have always been extremely influenced by that kind of stuff. It ties together with the Bowie element, right? Joy Division. We did not understand. That's the thing about having the internet and having newer things or writings and stuff. A lot of people didn't know about the epilepsy and stuff with Ian, right? They thought it was some other, he's depressed, he's mopey or bullshit. No, he had fucking really bad epilepsy. And, you know, and so, you know, that their music was so, you know, futuristic of the time. You listen to it today.
Oh yeah.
They were the best. Killing Joke.
Oh yeah.
Those first two, especially the first three, especially. I mean, that's very, very powerful. You know, all the time. You know, for us. The Public Image Limited. You know, the second edition, the Metal Box. Somewhat Bauhaus. You know, when I started as a disc jockey at FM. They had this about this big of a shelf, and it was the new wave punk section. And because of being poor, underprivileged, or whatever, I didn't have a lot of money. But this is where I started getting into the Damned. It was all their stuff, right? We just, well, which one do you want to play tonight, right? Deeply into the Stooges, deeply into the Dickies, or every sort of new wave or punk album that came out, you know, the Plastics, or you know, some different. They just had all this different stuff, you know, and so, and they also had a great jazz section. So we would play avant-garde jazz like late at night and stuff too, and that was pretty, you know, that was more of a recent thing for me, but I got to see Alice Coltrane play right before she died a year ago.
Wow.
Front row balcony. My buddy got But, so I've always liked jazz, you know, too, modern jazz, stuff like that. I never understand people who like one kind of music.
Yeah, me neither.
But coming back to the post-punk, Wanna Buy a Bridge perhaps is like the best just distillation of that than anything. It has one punk song on it. It has Alternative Ulster by Stiff Little Fingers, and then it goes to like Delta 5, Cabaret Voltaire, Pop Group, Young Marble Giants, all this stuff. It's a really, you probably can find it on YouTube pretty easily.
Oh yeah.
And check that out later. That was a big deal to us, because you could obviously tell listening to those groups how DIY they are. You say, well, yeah, these guys are not, they're not some overproduced thing. If you get a joint, you know, and that was the post-punk era to me. See, it came before hardcore, but then we look at it and like, that was such a peak of music and culture. They talk about Sheffield, like the avant-garde Human League stuff.
Yeah.
Things like that, right? I mean, you know all of this. You know, and so I had to understand, like, one thing, like Detroit has, I knew people like back, like a few of like Noir Leather people at Western and stuff, you know, and the goth thing, I was always like, I didn't quite understand it as well. I do now, You know, I didn't understand. We were more like snobbish then about different things. You know, so.
Here, let me move my stuff over here.
So there was that. You know. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah.
But I consider American hardcore to be a kind of post-punk.
That's an interesting theory.
No.
Interesting idea.
Well, think about what some of the bands did along the way, like what Middle Class, like the stuff that they did, very total post-punk sound. TSOL did stuff like they did stuff like later the Damn stuff, and they got shit for all these keyboards, you know. No, that was, you know, shifting that sound. Bad Religion they did stuff like that.
Well, even going back to like the first one of the early bands, like the Ramones, went and changed their sound up.
Phil Spector.
Yep, and then even the Cramps too had their sound kind of changed.
They got more rock and rolly and less primitive for them, I think.
Yeah. But what I think is interesting too for me with hardcore is like when I heard Brandon talk about like Sham 69 and all these like British bands that he was influenced by. It's funny because it's like when Negative Approach was doing their thing, it's like in Britain they were like looking to post-punk, and they thought of like Sham 69, all those bands. A lot of your post-punkers thought of it as like, well, you know, this is like taking punk and like trying to appeal to like a lower audience, you know, like with like the stadium chanting and your skinheads and
well, it kind of became codified as a style.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, as in the UK, the dress is so the micro levels of dress that signify what you belong to or stuff like that. It's not so pronounced here.
Yeah.
You know, and in fact, for a lot of us, we were always trying to fly under the radar, you know, and whatever, even though we couldn't, you know, just by who we were, it was enough, you know.
And I mean, like everybody seemed to, from what I hear, especially in Detroit, it's like there was a community that got built around with everybody, you know, and it crossed scenes, you know. I mean, it was like everybody kind of like had like I guess like a family. It became like a family type thing with the bands and with people.
Well, you have that's, you know, Detroit.
It's different from Chicago or New York.
Yes, and I only heard about Chicago punk rock. Well, there's some people from the Black Flag show in Lansing. That's where I first started hearing like Silver Abuse or Strike Under and these different bands, and Big Black and Naked Ray Gun and stuff, and how that built up. Very different because they were like college students. Those guys they weren't on like the rough streets or anything of Detroit or, you know, stuff like that. And they built a different kind of thing in Detroit. Yeah, I mean, just depending on where you were, you know, what parts. I mean, to live anywhere almost in the city in that time period was challenging. I mean, in some ways it still is. You have to deal with the city government or whatever. It's a pain in the ass in Detroit, right? So yeah, you know, my ex-wife used to say that, you know, Detroit people are some of the most optimistic people in the world, and they are. It's a challenging place to live.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
I think it creates the perfect condition for punk rock to flourish.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I've been really trying to understand more and know more, some about Detroit tech, because it's like the punk rock we have, like the Stooges and stuff like that. It's a pure thing out of Detroit.
Yep.
It has affected the entire world, right out of Michigan, right out of Detroit. These guys.
Yep.
And they're kind of more like, you watch like Jeff Mills doing a knob twiddling in the Amsterdam Museum and stuff like that. I mean, that's cool, yeah. You know, in my older age, that's been more what I've been getting into is understanding what, I've always had an interest in some in like different electronic music, so the college radio thing, dubstep even, and I love bass, stuff like that. So that's been a direction for me too, is stuff like that, and yes, really starting to understand better who these guys were, the Ron Atkins or Terrence Dixon or all these different, techno people. And
yeah,
with the internet, you can hear more, you can listen to more of their work. That's one of the nice things too about today, is it doesn't guarantee knowledge because we live in a real ignorant era, but we have access to just about anything. We can listen to almost any song that's ever been made easily, that kind of thing. So the questions we had about stuff that was unknown when we were younger, we mostly know now. But my wife and I are like into a lot of old Hollywood stuff, film noir stuff.
Oh,
like
yeah.
that. And we know who everybody was now. We can look, who's they were in this, or that guy's been at Perry Mason 10 times, or stuff like that. And so there is that. At the same time, it seems like our society, like you said before, like tribalism or stuff, something like that, where it's just kind of like people are forming their own opinions and ideas with fundamentally flawed base, that then what do you build up from that? Just bullshit.
Oh, yeah.
And so, that's, I want to see this be like a big archive like that.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
you have the energy and the interest.
Yeah, the energy.
And so,
yeah, and
I'm your friend, man. You too. We want to, anything I can do to help too.
Well, thank you. I want to ask you about, okay, did you guys, when you guys were playing, did you guys have to deal with the skinheads in like 84?
We mostly avoided all that. Okay.
Like they didn't come out.
I heard about that. Well, there was no skinheads in Kalamazoo. Lozon.
Yep. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I have some stories about him. He changed. He had a major character change. Did
he get out of the skinhead stuff? Or?
Yes, he got.
It seems like he would be one that would. I mean, I barely. I might have met him, or that's Lozon.
Well, let me tell you what happened to Dave Lozon. Dave Lozon went. He got into this band called Glod, and Glod is like, it's a very unique. I want to say like, no, it was like industrial, ambient, gothic, and he ended up having a black girlfriend, and then he renounced all that, and then apparently he moved to Arizona. And now he's gay, so he's a character arc. I mean,
that's a yeah. But I mean, we heard about those guys.
Yeah.
Might have seen a little bit from a distance, but no, not for me personally. That doesn't mean much in terms of they were.
Because I hear a lot of people that in these books talk about, well, Detroit, it was filled with these skinheads, this and that. And then I ask people, and they're like, there was like only like. You'd have like maybe 8 to 16 of those people, and then
that sounds more like what it probably was.
Yeah,
there wasn't. It wasn't in organized groups. It wasn't big.
I mean, there were
this little clique.
Yeah, well, they had their little names and organizations, like the Northern Hammers. Then they had one called the SS Action Brigade. But most of those guys grew out of that. And the guys that stuck with it, I don't know what's happened to them. It's a shame. But as I got told, I mean, a lot of those kids came from the suburbs of like around Detroit, and then they, whatever they were, raised on. Because you think about all the people that moved to the suburbs through the white flight. I mean, they're taught all this, and then they see somebody that's like. Black that gets up there and sings punk rock. It changed their mind, and they would renounce that stuff. But there were some that stuck with it, and I've heard bad stories about them, and you have to cover them because the scene wasn't exactly romantic, there were the downsides to it.
Reality's chaotic.
Yeah.
It's not just you can go to the easy boxers all the
It's
time.
like a Clint Eastwood movie. It's like all those spaghetti westerns, you know. Westerns before that with like your John Wayne movies, it's very much good and bad, you know. There's no like gray area. But then when you see the Eastwood movies, there's like that gray area where you can be a good person and do bad things, or you can be an overall bad person and do good things. And I mean, it's like that's like when you write a story about this, like you can't paint it entirely as this very romantic story, because it wasn't. But there were good things that came out of it, you know.
There's a lot of good things.
I mean, nowadays you can walk down the streets and you can have colored hair and have a mohawk, and for the most part people don't bother you. Back then, you know, I mean, did you guys wear like leather jackets and do all that?
I mean, a little. We wore engineer boots and, you know, stuff like that. Plaid shirts. I don't know, jeans. I don't know. It depends on who it was. Some people did more stuff than others. I had a day job, you know, and stuff. So I was never. So I was gonna say, the origins of the urban crisis. That's what that book you said. That's exactly what you're talking about.
Yep.
Right there.
Yep.
That's all that stuff's in that book. About how the people
and
in the
it was-
suburbs and where
yeah.
was where and stuff.
And that's like kind of what my introduction to the book is gonna like talk about. That is like that's the background, because that kind of helped make the conditions for it. And what I find interesting is there's a circle. There's like this circular kind of like cycle. It's like, okay, you have the Stooges, you have Motown, you have the MC5, and then this circle happens. They go and they influence the New York Dolls, David Bowie, and then it's like David Bowie, and then you have
George Clinton.
Yeah, and George Clinton, and then also then you have punk rock, like with the Sex Pistols, the Damned, and the Ramones, and then that circle kind of goes back. It goes around and it's like it comes back, and it's like they influence Detroit. So it's like there's this like weird little kind of, I want to say cycle that's kind of like, I don't know if the word schizophrenic is correct, because it's just all over the place. It zigzags. It's like there's all these influences and it all comes back. It makes a full comeback to Detroit. And I think that's an interesting story for us, because LA didn't really have that. LA, it wasn't like that. In Chicago, it wasn't like that. But for Detroit, it's like we were ground zero, and then you come back to us with the British version, and then we do it. But then it's like we get ignored as a scene, which is like something like I want to like ask you is like, do you feel like Michigan and Detroit? Do you think it got like ignored big time?
It's hard. Like, okay, when I was a little kid, I wanted to thank you, because I wanted to mention about this. Goose Lake.
Goose Lake. I've heard of Goose Lake, I think.
Goose Lake was a mini Woodstock. I mean, I say mini, it was still pretty damn big. It was like 250,000 people or something. It was about 5 miles east of Jackson. Richard Songer was a developer, highway developer in Detroit area. He built the park. Russ Gibb was super involved in it.
Oh, yeah.
The Stooges played there. There was the one where Dave Alexander was laying on the ground and stuff.
Oh,
He
yeah.
made like he was actually playing. But that was like a pretty big showcase of Detroit stuff. You know, because, you know, SRC and other, I don't know the exact, but there were Detroit bands that played there. It brought a lot to the area. You know, now the backlash of that was super intense. That's all I heard as a kid. Goddamn hippies, you know, blah, 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 you know. And we went over. I could feel it in the ground. I was at my aunt and uncle's house. You could feel it. And then we went over the next day like mountains of garbage.
Wow.
But so there was one place where Detroit very much crossed over into a bigger, you know, an event that was like Watkins Glen or Woodstock or, you know, and any of that kind of stuff. I mean, you can't. I mean, Barry Cordy. I mean, you know.
Well, I mean, I feel like with hardcore, like specifically like hardcore punk, like I feel like you guys.
Okay, Negative Approach. Okay, so 2006 or something.
Yeah.
Whatever, 8. I'm at that Touch and Go 25th anniversary in Chicago, and Negative Approach comes out. It's like Civil War reenactment, right? You know, these guys take out the kids, there's like smoke coming out, and I'm like, yeah. And those guys, what do? They play in Moscow, they play, Berlin, they played in China.
Yeah.
I mean,
they're finally getting their due. It's just I think in the 80s. I mean, finally. I mean, they're starting to get the validation. I just feel like in the 80s, it's like when everybody.
Nothing got validated. No, it's like that song by X, unheard music. And you think about the point. So you said, think about these groups, Black Flag, all these bands, Adolescents, in the shadow of Hollywood itself. If Darby Crash had lived, he would have been an American Bowie. And with Hollywood coming, right there. You walk across the fucking street, go get your teeth fixed, instead the other. He was that talented. There were, that's the things you think, too. But Detroit, the fact that Iggy Pop is still alive and doing shit, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. He's,
of course,
got the recognition, and the things that I read about the influence of techno in Europe and around the world, I saw this thing where I think it was Mills in Lithuania, and he's playing the string song, and it's one of the early techno songs, and it's just like the place is going nuts, and that is straight out of Detroit. There's no filter out of Detroit that is Detroit. And the punk music we have is like that. The Negative Approach can play in Moscow or PK. That's real, man. It's extremely real.
Well, tell me about like you guys toured around the Midwest. I mean,
we never got a chance to actually tour.
Well, not tour, but you guys played shows around the Midwest.
We played in Chicago. And that was the one where we played with Channel 3, Rights of the Accused, I think, and Dave Grohl was there. He was a teenager. We played in Indianapolis when we recorded the stuff for the master tape, like Society Rules and stuff like that. But mostly the rest of it was all in Michigan.
I mean, what was the crowd like for you guys there compared to Michigan? Was it bigger or was it smaller or equal size?
Indianapolis was big for whatever reason. There was a lot of, they were recording the compilations, a lot of band people, but it was a big deal. Chicago was exciting. There were probably 100 people there, maybe. Not huge. I mean, nothing, the biggest ones we did were at Western. But we played in Detroit 15 times, maybe. We played in Lansing a few times. Ann Arbor. We played several times in Grand Rapids. In fact, towards the end, we made the most money in Grand Rapids. Where we actually were getting paid, for headlining and stuff there. That was we played in Muskegon, which is talk about that's a redneck punk rock of Michigan. Muskegon. We played there. A bunch of times in Kalamazoo. I think we might have played in Holland once. I'm not sure. But that was the thing. Why didn't we tour? We couldn't afford it. We didn't have parental or whatever. We were just struggling, to get
Tell me about did you guys do merchandise, make merchandise, or
Did I give you that CD?
No, you didn't.
Where'd it go? It was in my notebook. Hello. Must be in the car. It's probably in the car, but I had a CD for it. It's the one we made for the 2010. So Tony Retman made a record of our earliest stuff about 2 or 3 years ago. I'm going to look around, and if I have more than one of those, I want to give one to you.
Okay. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah,
I'd love it.
There aren't, of the Here Today, the 7-inch that we made back then, I don't have any more left. I have one. So, but I did do that. And well, when we go out to the, are you in the parking ramp?
Over there. I parked over there.
I'm moving that way.
Okay.
Okay, but I'll get this to you.
Yeah. We don't have to do it right now.
But anyway, go ahead. What else you got?
Well, I wanted to ask about like the how did you guys? What was the process like for you guys making a record at that time? Was it like just pretty much like getting a tape recorder and just recording somewhere, or?
Okay, so in the fall of 1981, we did the process of elimination stuff. I think every track was recorded in this in East Lansing, this guy's house, and then maybe about a month or two later, we went in as VA and recorded some stuff, but it never got. That's the stuff that Tony Ruttman just put out. So that was in East Lansing, and we did a 4-track there. When we did stuff later in Indianapolis, that was, I don't know, 16-track or 8-track. I don't know what it was, but he had really good stuff, So those came out, super good. But did we do, like the CD I was going to give you, there's some songs that are from a boombox on there, definitely. For us, we did a lot of T-shirts back in the day. There was this guy, Andy Humiston, and he could do screen printing. So, and then Kenny worked in a print shop, so he made all our flyers and stuff. There was this thing in Kalamazoo where they had wheat pasted these flyers onto the black flag onto electrical box. It was there for almost 20 years.
Wow.
So, but yeah, they had different ways of, of getting merchandise or getting things associated with us. It was nice to have the tie-in, when we had Western and Kenny was working at the print shop and things like that. And that was his profession mostly, was print. So that worked out really well.
Would you say the Midwest had the edge in the 80s with the punk bands?
Yes, I would. And so this was one more thing I was going to tell you about. Have you ever seen a compilation called Charred Remains?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, okay. It was on cassette originally. Although somebody actually made some kind of boutique vinyl thing of it a few years ago. But we have 3 songs on there from that same session of the one I was just telling you about right after the process. We're in the company of Husker Du, De Kreuzer, all this shit. Yeah, so I mean, how do we why are we here with this? But that ended up being the case too. So that was another piece of us getting out there and merchandise stuff. And that sells for a lot of money on eBay.
Somebody's got to have a copy of it on YouTube.
That's all on YouTube. It's all on YouTube. The Charred Remains stuff is, yeah.
Because there's so many bands, and it's like they either did cassette tapes or they did these one-off singles, and some of them I can't find any of their stuff on YouTube, and it's you have to ask for CDs and or you have to ask them if they got copies, and it's quite a process to find a copy.
There it is right there.
I'm going to check that out. I'm going to definitely
Void, Husker Du, Rebel Truth, Personality Crisis, Italian, Shotgun, Violent Apathy, Dogs of War, Articles of Faith, The Kreutzen, Double O, Toxic Reasons. Yeah, that's a good company to be in there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, check that out. That's another thing that we did.
Now, what about like your like songwriting, like songs? Like, how did you guys come up with like your songs and like? Was it just like
Kenny had some really good ideas in the beginning?
Was Kenny like the main writer? Or?
He wrote a lot of the words. You know, if you go back and look at a lot of the words in the early stuff, they're really pretty good. And mostly I just put some chords together. You know, I started playing guitar as a student at Western. I played trumpet and band all the way through 5th grade to 12th grade. I knew music, kind of. Terrible guitarist. I can't play shit. Bar chords, you know. But we had got that together and then the playing and stuff. And where am I going with this? What was the question again?
It was about like how you guys came up with songs.
Oh, songwriting, yeah. I would just put a progression together and see how it we try to do fast, slow kind of stuff. Tommy Fuller, when he came into the band, he ended up writing all of it. And writing lyrics too, like Society Rules he wrote. But a lot of the stuff Kenny and I wrote together, later stuff like Bought and Sold, stuff like that.
Was there like a prevalent like motif in a lot of your songs, like a prevalent theme or?
I think it mostly was just what we could come up with at the time. I don't know. We weren't thinking it through any more than that. It was just like, yeah, whatever. This sounds good. Okay. We knew. Okay, so Jim Forgy, our bass player, is an actual professional musician. He was a woodwind guy. He played in symphonies and stuff all the rest of his life. He plays in Connecticut. His musicianship is what drove a lot of the early stuff, and his bass playing, which then leads you back kind of that, like Peter Hook almost kind of stuff, or, he's super like that, right? So he added that. He did the songwriting, and Elliot had a very unique style of drumming, so when you put it all together, it's a combination of the elements, I guess. But yeah, we would just, maybe have a lyrical idea, a musical idea, try to put it together. That wasn't much more than that most of the time. We did a lot of covers, like we did Woohoo way before the phone commercial or whatever. We did La Bamba. We heard about from Tesco. There's this group called Plugs that do La Bamba, this funk version. You guys ever know? We never heard that either. So that was cool. We did Time Has Come Today, before the Ramones. We did Paranoid. And so we did covers that we did too. And so every set we'd end with maybe a couple covers, but yeah, I mean, we were pissed off at society. We were just, we felt like outsiders. Even to the extent that what we looked like, we would get bullies. And a Devo or fag or whatever, kind of stuff. I mean, that was real. And when we talk about, again, one of the things of punk rock was making society acceptable for different kinds of people. I worry about that now, obviously.
Yeah, me too.
But that, we did. And that is something that I'm real proud of being part of that. I talk to a lot of young people. I work with young people on my job and stuff. And they've got a hard time coming, with stuff. So,
And I think that's interesting because I feel like what was most important for these bands was to make some kind of a statement, It was like, maybe not in like your musicianship or your lyrics, but like to say like we're doing this because we don't like the way society's going, and that's interesting. I mean, I'd like to see that happen today. Bands pop up. I'd like to see punk rock make a comeback, and it's funny because if you go on Instagram, there's like I see a bunch of kids that are coming out of Southern California, and they're like doing like this like style that's like it reminds me of Minor Threat and the Circle Jerks and Black Flag.
Have you seen like Baltimore stuff?
I haven't seen any of the Baltimore bands
There's
that currently.
Some really crazy shit that comes out of Baltimore. Just in general, it's the last few years, like people in wheelchairs and stuff. Just all kinds of stuff, like different, multiracial groups and stuff. It's very intense, musically, spirit, even with maybe a little bit more action going on sometimes.
What I think is interesting too for me, when you mention it, and everybody mentions it to me, is the age of this is the age before cell phones and social media, and how you guys got music through like sharing cassette tapes and through like writing letters to people out of state, and that's an interesting story in of itself, because I think that's a good thing to talk about in the book, especially to stress to people that are my age who weren't there, because it's like
it was not easy.
No.
You had to actually find stuff, and people today, because of the easiness of finding knowledge, you can't be so snobbish about, well, I know this and you don't.
Yeah.
It's like we can both easily find it.
Well, and now I feel like with that, like you get bands that like will take more influences and they'll try to make their own style. And also it's like with like the subgenre groups that come out, because it seems like, and this theory that I'm trying to prove and a point I'm trying to make to people my age is that like there wasn't really the term goth or new wave.
There was new wave.
I mean, new wave, but
new wave goes all the way back to '77.
But most people thought of themselves as punks. I mean, if you were like there wasn't really the term goth, and there wasn't like death rock or like all these other little like pigeonholing names, and like it was like there was like really this great big group of people, and it was like punk and new wave, and or it was interchangeable, but everybody kind of like they kind of fit into that category, and that was the big thing. And then over time it changed, and then you start getting well punk rock's not rebellious enough, and then it's like you start getting all these little subgenres and people mixing and matching styles. And I think that's interesting.
Well, that's a postmodern time.
Because I mean, your band, Negative Approach, and the Necros were like the first Michigan really hardcore bands, if you think about it. And then like you have the second wave, and I know a lot of the second wave groups that were in Detroit, and they talk about Negative Approach and the Necros, and mention your band, and then all these other bands. And I think that's interesting, because it's like to get your perspective on things is like getting a perspective from somebody that did it before people latched onto it,
It was
before the kids from the suburbs really did.
Yeah, I mean we I mean I think for me one of the figures that really speaks to like the more of the cultural validation of a larger sense of hardcore music in America is Kurt Cobain.
Kurt Cobain, that's an interesting one. I think of him as grunge,
but he normalized punk rock for people. People listen to all kinds of shit based on his recommendation that they would have never thought of.
Oh, I know that, especially with like a blues. Like he had this love for Leadbelly, and he was
the Raincoats and stuff like that.
And
post-punk.
that MTV Unplugged thing that he did, the Unplugged like session that he did, and he was doing all these old blues songs, and it's like he kind of got another generation interested in folk music and in the blues. And I mean, if you think about like punk and everything, it all goes back to that.
A lot of people went from him to go to the show. They went from him. Maybe I should check out the Bad Brains or whatever. It's like that was so it made what we had done like, okay, well, yeah, for male, punk rock and roll guys, I guess we're acceptable now or something, and more than, which means, yeah, you got to go to the next level, but he did that, I think, and it'd be interesting to see what would happen if he had lived longer.
Oh yeah.
Too, I think there would have been more, some different things there. Have you been tracking this thing at all with Neurosis and the new stuff that they did?
I haven't.
It's pretty good. They got the singer from ISIS now. He joined them after they booted their singer out for domestic violence and all this shit. Thought they were never going to play again, and then they got him back. That's some pretty good stuff. You have to check those guys.
It's interesting too to see that you have a lot of bands that are still touring that are from that time, like Fear. The Damned are still touring, and then
is this a retirement thing for them? This one, they're saying it's their last one. Or?
Yeah, I think this is supposed to be their last concert.
Those guys are a little bit older than me, so I mean, it's
that concert. I mean, when I saw them last year, and I was like, I love the Damned, but I've always heard their music. But when you see them live, it's a whole nother thing than you just hearing New Rose on a CD or a record. But I think it's interesting. It's interesting because I see people my age that are taking an interest in punk rock, and there's kind of this a little bit of like, I want to say 80s nostalgia, and like they did a study on it that like Gen Z, I think it's like over 50% of people that are Gen Z say like, they have this fascination with older music and with like the 80s.
Well, that's that
the
whole
90s.
vinyl revival
Yeah.
and everything else there too. Yeah, absolutely.
I also think it's the because of social media and cell phones, and you have that like that really like intense like isolation that kind of comes about with that, and people see what happened back then, and they want to experience that, and they relate to punk rock and stuff because of what's going on in the world today. And I think that's interesting too. I think there's like this perfect climate that we like what happened in 1980, and you look at 2025, 26, it's like it's like history. What was it that Mark Twain said? History doesn't repeat itself, but it sure does rhyme.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been living in Jackson, for the last few years after living in Kalamazoo for about 40 years. And everybody in Jackson, Trump, everyone, you can assume everyone you see likes him. Okay? The town is blown out. It's not Gary, Indiana blown out, but mostly they keep up with the demolition, so it doesn't all be. But then, it's half empty, it's you come over here and it's like Cambridge or something.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, and there's going to be more of a divide in our country between the people who, what do you want to say, like the people who have knowledge and, such, and the people who don't. It's getting
sure.
more so.
Let me ask you, do you have any like, and I always like to ask people for like, if you got any funny stories from like shows that you went to or played?
I mean, the one about, the Dave Grohl thing, I don't, that's, I don't, other people will have better funny stories than me. I'm more than just remembering the facts kind of thing. But if you talk to some of those guys, McKenny or
McKenny, okay.
Elliot, those guys will have more funnier stories probably than me. Trying to think. But,
these are my ACLS notes, and Alia made her own notes.
I don't know, man. It wasn't about fun. I mean, there was personal stuff like, they had a mouse in a jar one time and broke it up and stuff like that. I mean, but I don't know. I can't think of anything really.
Do you still play music?
I have the thing we do every week with a friend of mine, Jeff in Jackson. He also went to Western and stuff. I go back and forth between playing guitar and drums poorly, and it's mostly improvisation, although we kind of worked into some stuff and might play in Kalamazoo. So yeah, I am playing.
Good. What would you say to younger people who are like into the music? Maybe they want to start a band. Maybe they look to you for some kind of inspiration. What would you say to them? Because like I said, you were there in the beginning with hardcore here in Detroit and in Michigan, and I think it would be great for them to hear some advice that you might have.
Well, one thing is, is stick with it.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, that's in my work. I talk about that a lot. I'm a social worker. I work with people with disabilities and staying independent and getting work and stuff like that. And, that's a big thing. Is just stay with it. Work on trying to master your instrument the best you can. If you're going to play an instrument, if it's electronics, how do they work? And, that piece of it. It always helps to know what other people are doing. I mean, that's with art, any art, you're not creating something that's never been done, totally. You might be adding a small piece of uniqueness. Your hope is some small piece of uniqueness that you're adding that nobody else has or whatever. But even to do that, you better know a lot about what people have already done. I mean, I think that's study the history, which you have the availability now to try to understand that stuff. We had to just kind of guess or read a whole batch of rock and roll or something. But yeah, I mean, just the thing I would say is just keep working on stuff, People, it's something that I used to think is something had to come out fully formed because it did for us. And that was what was really freaky. We didn't have to work, it just happened, at the time. But most of the time you have to work towards stuff, to be substantial and don't give up.
Of course. And let me ask you this. We have that book, Why Be Something You're Not. There's that book, Detroit Rock City. And I mean, there's things in there, and like I said and we talked about earlier, I liked the book that Steve Miller did and the other guy did. And that inspired me to want to do this, to write a book of my own that had something that didn't get told. And I've been looking for things, and I've gotten quite a list of things that need to be talked about that those books didn't cover. And I'd like to ask you your personal opinion. What is something that those books didn't cover that you would like to see covered in a book? A new book about the scene in Michigan and Detroit, surrounding Detroit, Southeast Michigan, Midwest.
I think it's the stuff that happens over time. And today, I mean, I don't know what Proto Martyr is doing this week, but they've done a lot of shit, right? I mean, so you have, like that, and what can you have it be over time that will sustain and grow into different things. As far as I guess if I understand the question, I'm getting kind of talked out. It's stylistic stuff. I mean, you have to know what has gone on before you in some way or another. Very few people are complete indigenous folk artist type stuff. We see that in pop music, don't we, sometimes? Where somebody just pulls something out. Hazel Atkins maybe, something like that, right? Somebody just completely. But most of the time, if you're trying to create something and it's tie it to a specific culture or whatever, you have to have some knowledge of it, as much knowledge as you can, which is easier to get now.
So you think a knowledge about say for example Detroit itself, what came out before it?
Yes, I do. I mean, we think about this with Detroit, with Jackson, history of managed decline, planned deindustrialization.
Yep.
And these, destructive mechanisms of the city that tie into, yes, how would you respond to that as a person? I know for myself, even living in Jackson the last few years, like, holy shit, now I understand. Why was there violent apathy? Now I understand. Because this city is so repressive, that it doesn't have a scene, it's nothing at night. There's nothing. In Detroit, it's sort of the same thing, in that there's just been so much that has been beaten down over time, and to understand that, not just from the suburban perspective of, well, this is a dumpy playground, we can do whatever we want in, but to understand it in a bigger picture, this is what capitalism does.
Of course.
This is what it is.
Yeah.
A city that people in Europe study like the ruins of Rome and shit, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so that is...
They call it creative destruction.
Exactly, yes. So if you're going to do any kind of art in Detroit, you have to understand that concept.
Of course.
And a lot of Michigan, too.
Yes.
So, yeah, it does tie in quite a bit,
And I feel like another thing that I think propelled people towards punk was the expectation that people were given in society. Like, you expected to work a factory job. You were expected to get some kind of job and work in that for the rest of your life, to stifle any kind of difference. And there was that expectation of conformity, suburban living, wife, kids, and being like very much like a robot. And maybe you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I get that feeling that punk rock was like a way, and hardcore was a way of saying, like, fuck that. We're gonna do whatever we want and do how we want and live the life we want to. And life doesn't have to be like that.
Well, it's both, in that there was that fuck you element, but there was also a time of extremely diminished opportunity, so it was kind of went together, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, when you go back and look at Detroit, there was like social engineering from Ford and stuff. You had to act a certain way, and if you didn't, you get this. They had people at the intelligence department, Henry Ford had, and all this shit.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, if you were going to take that life, you were going to do this, and you were going to, do those kind of things. Even then, there were bohemians, artists. There was the John Lee Hookers, or your jazz guys in Detroit and stuff like that. There's always people that were kind of flaunting that in one way or another. But when the opportunities are less, it becomes even more pronounced. Like in Jackson, okay, the factory pays $22 an hour or something. It's like, who's going to do that? When it should be 40 or 45 to have the equivalent of what my parents made, like working at 50 or plus years ago. That's how much pay has declined, in the real world. So we also live in a society where I'm a believer of universal basic income.
Me too.
We're talking about that with people more and more.
Me too.
And I mean, geez, how many $1 trillion can you afford? And see, when I was young, there was books like Future Shock, where it's like, well, people in the future, people are going to work 2 hours a day and have fun to make music all day, and they'll all be rich because we're going to make so much. It didn't turn out that way. No. It turns out we got Bezos or these guys holding all the money, or Elon Musk or whatever, and just using that to control society in a different way, which then breeds us to different kinds of rebellion, doesn't it?
Of course.
Which we hate that bullshit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, kind of a circle in some ways, I think there's a lot of parallels with what Reagan was like and what it is now. It's way worse now. I mean, it's like, I was a kid, I've always been politically active. My mom was lifelong in the Democratic Party in Jackson and stuff. And, back when I was a kid, it was like George Wallace, right? It was a big racist and stuff like that. Our society now is worse. It's all this shit, just, rolling back the Voting Rights Act, or doing all this crazy shit, man. And it's like, in Jackson, they might elect a mayor this time who is a Trump guy who's going to set the city backward further than the society is later on. So yeah, there's plenty to get upset about.
Yeah.
You know, and I crack up when I think about like the conservative rebels. You know those terms. What do you got to make this so political for? What do you got to blah 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 blah? Whatever, man. You know?
Yeah. And it's like people that say they're conservative and they like punk rock and they complain and say, well, why are you making punk so political? It's like you don't have a clue what punk rock's about, you know. To me, that's being a poser, you know. That's just me. That's posing. That's more posing than somebody wearing a leather jacket with pins.
If you don't understand the philosophy behind it in the first place, then
yeah.
Thank you.
It's like the band Crass. Like I feel like they were very much like
they lived it.
They lived it. I mean, were you guys listening to any of those British bands like GBH?
Okay, the same. Yeah, well, sort of. Yeah, we played
UK
with GBH.
UK Subs.
Okay, well, I can tell you this: the same guy that had the Joy Division and the Mark Stewart, the pop group records, and one of my relationship, he also had Media the 5000. So yes, we did heard that done. Yes, many times do they owe us? Of course they fucking do. Yes, we heard that a lot.
How did you feel about like metal music?
You know, some I like. Does that go through your phone or is it?
Oh no, I was just checking my phone. No, I was just checking my phone real quick. I was seeing if I got a text message.
So good. I have a hard time with music that doesn't have any melody or harmony I can get with, and some metal's like that. Some, if it's like Slayer was always great. They have good shit. And they were like the crossover, weren't they? Like for a lot of people, and it was interesting, especially like in the late '80s and early '90s, how many metal people related back to punk rock. I mean, punk rock people related to metal. Some, I think, even like Eye Against Eye, Bad Brains. You know, some elements of that going on and stuff. On a personal level, I like more of the like progressive stuff. You know. Like Neurosis, they're pretty good, so you know, but yeah, I mean, what with metal, it's not as inclusive a culture, I don't think.
Yeah.
So you do have that. The more inclusive culture is Juggalo. Very inclusive. You know, I mean, you touched up against that a little bit. So, and punk rock, we want to be inclusive to anybody.
Definitely. And I was going to ask you, I think one of my final questions I was going to ask you is, philosophically, and I ask this with everybody that I talk to, philosophically, what would you say punk rock is?
Well, it's using music, using really the language of popular music, so to speak. And I don't say popular music by it being popular, but opposed to art music or folk music or whatever, using the language of rock and roll in a more rebellious way, in a more do-it-yourself way. The idea of punk music, now granted, there's examples of the opposite. You have your Malcolm McLarens, stuff like that, the Svengalis and all that. But in America, aside from the few groups of Dickies or somebody that was with A&M, America, we had to do it ourselves. And that's what it means to me, too, is if you do something, you'll get something done. If you don't do anything, you've accomplished nothing. If so that's, what punk means to me, and the idea of, like you said about, what does work mean? I have worked in the public sector all my life. I'm nonprofit government. I've worked to help people, and a big part of my philosophy is I don't want to help some asshole get rich while I make minimum wage. So those kind of things fit into a punk. What is authority? What is legitimate authority? What do we do with illegitimate authority? We obviously want to call it out. If we can do more to say, whatever, so a lot of times we're powerless, and the punk rock is the rage we express in our powerlessness. Right? So it's a way of expression through music and language to deal with the fact that people have been marginalized from society in a lot of ways. And so does that get close?
Yeah. Well, it leads me to a few more questions. Do you remember any women specifically in the punk scene besides Larissa? I mean, were there any other women in the punk scene that you remember?
Not so much in Michigan in bands. I mean, and it was a very, girlfriends and stuff, but that's not what you're thinking of. The Tea Snakes in Kalamazoo, they had, but that's not really it. Not among our sector much. And really, aside from people like Craig Calvert, not really very many people of color either. I mean, so yeah, I mean, a lot of women came to the shows and stuff, but not in the bands, not in that time period.
So there were women that did come to punk shows.
Oh yeah.
Were they like decked out in gear and everything?
Some of them were. Wait a minute. Wait, what am I saying? There were. Okay, hang on. Wait, I got to back up. Sherry would probably be one of the biggest in Kalamazoo.
Do you know Sherry's full name?
Sherry. Oh yeah, it's Sherrie.
Okay.
And her last name is Feight. Feight. She was the singer of Spastic Rhythm Tarts and Strange Fruit.
Okay.
So yeah, that's a big one in Kalamazoo.
Because that's another thing I want to cover. Is I feel like with the books too, is there were women in the punk scene and in these other scenes that I feel like they deserve to get talked about.
Sherry deserves to get talked about. There's I think on YouTube you could find the Strange Fruit 7-inch that they did.
Okay.
And then like we said, at the end of their thing, Steve Shelley was playing with them for a few months, so before he went to Sonic Youth. And she knows Steve she's from Mount Pleasant, Sherry is. So, but yeah, that would be probably one of the biggest for Kalamazoo area would be her.
Is there now? Let me ask you. Is there anybody that you talk to? Now we've talked about Kenny and Elliot and some people, but is there anybody else that you could think of that might be a good person to talk to? I mean, we've talked about Tuska.
John Howard. Right?
Yep, John Howard.
Craig from the Fix.
Yep.
Steve Shelley himself may have some input on some stuff.
Okay. I mean, and if you talk to anybody and you think of anybody, because sometimes I try to friend people and message them, and
they think it's spam. They don't know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
If I can help you with some contact,
if you could,
Creighton, I would absolutely.
Do you talk to John Brandon by any chance?
I have no contact. No, I'm not that high up in the echelon of stuff. No. What I understand is he was always on Twitter, so that was never. He's never been on Facebook.
I know he's on Instagram.
That too. Is he working? Does Traffic Jam and Snug still even exist?
I'm not sure.
I know because it seems like something happened to them, like a fire or something. Or maybe I heard something. I don't know, but he worked there for a long time. you know.
Oh, Touch and Go. We talked about Touch and Go. Were there any other fanzines?
Maximum Rock and Roll. It's funny because both Kenny and Tommy Fuller did their own little zines. And Kenny's was Etch, and Tommy had one called Red Alert. And that was through their little magazines. That's how they wrote to people and stuff. And they both had, I think Tommy might have interviewed The Clash, I think in Grand Rapids or something. You know.
You have to forgive me if because you mentioned that, and you have to forgive me if I forgot about that.
That's all right.
Sometimes my attention.
My mind is going too, but it's been a great talk.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And if you got any final words to say, anything?
Well, let this not be our final words. I mean, if there's, I mean, we got some good stuff to go through what we have, and then if you have follow-up stuff, I've had a tough week. Stressful but good. When I first came to Jackson, like 11 years ago, I bought this cottage called the Shack, and lived there kind of for a minute, but also had it back and forth between two places, Kalamazoo, and then we have a condo in the city of Jackson too. Well, my neighbor made me an offer I couldn't refuse. Everything I'm done with the place. I got twice as much money as I paid for. I got $35,000. I guess that's better than 18 what I paid. So, but it's been just the stress of dealing with all that. I had to clean all my shit out, boxes of records out of there and stuff. So I've been kind of back and forth between adrenaline and caffeine and so. But I've been looking forward to this all week. And knowing that I wanted to talk to you and stuff, so
yeah, it's been a pleasure.
I mean, I really, especially as I get into this next phase of my life or whatever, understanding that this does have a cultural value. It was not a fad.
No.
It's something that is deep into our culture now, and as it's gone there, it's mutated and it's changed to be really a real genuine mass movement.
Definitely.
All right, what else you got?
That's it for me.
Okay, we are 2:47.